Welcome to the Dream Journal. I'm your host, Catherine Bell. Today, I am sharing with you a conversation with designer Victoria Rogers. We talk about inequities in safe spaces and in sleep. And Victoria describes her research into how enhancing the dream lives of Black people can enable them to not just survive, but to thrive. I'm excited to share with you an audio update in which Victoria talks about what she is up to now. You'll hear that during the break. Now, on with the journal. Good morning. Broadcast live from the KSQD studios in Surf City, Santa Cruz, you are listening to The Dream Journal, a show where we explore the healing powers of your nighttime dreams through conversations with dream experts and with you. In the words of Carl Jung, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside, awakens. We will live in the future that we dream of today. Call in your freedom now.
I've been saving this to tell you when we had some extra time. When the sky
The Dream Journal host, strategist, and designer Victoria Rogers, who created a soundscape called Black Noise,
there were places I was going.
with the particular needs and sensibilities of Black people in mind. We will explore topics including the inequities of dream spaces and how we can use dreams for explorations that are more difficult in waking life. I am your host, Catherine Bell of Experiential Dreamwork, and welcome to the Dream Journal. So, Dream Journal is also a podcast, so you can look for that on all your podcast platforms and also on the KSQD website at ksqd.org/the-dream-journal. I'm excited today to welcome new listeners through KCXU Community Radio of San Jose. Welcome to the Dream Journal tribe. Growing the dream, we are. So I like to start with my personal dream work, just to take a minute to check in. And in these busy mornings, it's always good to check in with a dream. So I have a dream where I go to Overlook, which is close to my house, and I look across the way, and I see this road that presumably I've driven on frequently, that this is like a common road that I've been on. And yet I'm amazed to see that the road goes through these spectacular rock pinnacles and cliffs, and it's just amazingly beautiful. And yet I've driven on this many times and never noticed. And I feel like this is just a way of looking back on my life and looking back on who I am and recognizing the incredible beauty. And really, this is kind of a spiritual dream for me, just to recognize this sense of awe that permeates my life, and sometimes at a level that I don't even really recognize. So maybe this is one of those moments. I'm driving along, pledge drive, and driving the Dream Journal, and yet it's also a place of driving through the spectacular beauty. So really, this is an amazing opportunity to be here on the air with you, spreading my enthusiasm about dreams and getting you to think about your dreams just a little bit more. I'd like to welcome Victoria Rogers. Hi, Victoria.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on today.
Great. I'm glad to have you. Victoria Rogers is a strategist focused on how to build a more equitable future for the most people. She is currently working for Alphabet, the company that owns Google, and was formerly the director of arts at Kickstarter, where she led the crowdfunding platform's efforts to serve the cultural community, raising over $9.6 million for 220 projects from over 93,000 people. We all know about Kickstarter. Victoria holds an MBA from Stanford University, an MFA from Parsons School of Design, and a BA from Yale University. At Parsons, her thesis, Black Noise, focused on inequality in dream space, particularly for Black people. So, Victoria, I would like to welcome you to the West Coast for one thing. When we spoke last fall, or last spring, I think it was, you were still at Parsons, and I think you've since moved out to the Bay Area. Is that right?
No, I'm still here. I'm calling in from New York City. I'm in Flatiron.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right. Well, That's okay. Through the miracle of technology, we can speak to you as if you were right inside my own ears right now. And
Exactly.
yeah. So I want to talk a lot more about the black noise dreams space, sound space that you've created. And we'll have some clips to play here in a little bit. But I'd like to start with a little bit of background. How did you first get interested in dreaming, Victoria?
I really think that for me, dreams became an avenue through which to explore imagination.
Mm, mm-hmm.
And a lot of my work in the 2 years I was at Parsons was thinking about, in a post George Floyd moment, what does it mean to be a Black person living in urban space,
Mm-hmm.
and what are some of the tools, services, experiences that could support Black people as we continue to exist in the present, but also are moving towards a future that's hopefully more inclusive
Mm-hmm.
of us.
Absolutely.
And there's an amazing artist named Alicia Wormsley who has an artwork where she states there are Black people in the future.
Mm.
And I started to think at my time at Parsons, what would it look like to support that future? What are some of the things that could be built or experimented with to make sure that in that future, we're not just surviving and existing, but really thriving? And so imagination was something that I explored in a few classes. How do you support Black imaginations? And dreams became an avenue for that work.
So one of the things that we've talked about is access to dream spaces and inequality in particular. And I wonder if you could say something about your experience as a Black woman and your experience with Black communities with access to dreaming and imagination and creativity spaces.
Sure. So there's been a lot of great work around sleep. And if we think about sleep as in some ways an avenue to dreaming, though of course it's not one to one. If you sleep, you don't always have a dream experience that you're cognizant of.
Mm-hmm.
And also there are ways to dream while awake. But sleep is where I started, where I thought, okay, if the sleep gap has been publicized so much, Black people don't have access to sleep for all of the reasons that one might imagine.
Right. And what is that gap?
Whether it's
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to put the numbers out there. Like, what is that gap that I mean, I've heard the
yes,
statistic, but I'm curious what your statistics are, what your...
sure. So my statistics come from Brian Resnick, who wrote an article called "The Racial Inequality of Sleep" in the Atlantic,
Mm-hmm.
and I can quote him. It's like 20% of most people's nights are spent in slow wave sleep. And most white participants in a study that he was writing about hit that mark, while Black participants only had about 15% of the night in slow wave sleep. And then on top of that, there's less sleep time in general. So not only less slow wave sleep, but less time spent sleeping, where white people on average sleep like 6.85 hours. Black people sleep on average 6.05.
Oh my goodness.
And so there's a difference there. There's a difference there that's significant. And I think another piece of data that's important to mention is that sleep has 4 different cycles. REM sleep, which is the 4th cycle, tends to be where most vivid dreaming happens. And that stage of sleep actually extends the more cycles you get through. And so I was really curious about what's at stake when we are not getting, as Black people on average, of course this isn't everyone, but when Black people on average are not getting to some of those later cycles of sleep.
Mm-hmm. What did you find out, or what have you been working to compensate for that?
Sure. And I guess one other study that I'll add into the mix, just to give us a grounding. There's this amazing person who I spoke to, his name is Michael Nadorf. He'd done an experiment with a group of colleagues around nightmares in particular, to see if there's a difference across ethnic groups. And Black people, on average, again, have 2.5 times more nightmares than people of all other races in the US.
That's a huge difference.
And yeah, a huge difference. And again, this adds to this idea if we believe that dreams matter, what's at stake when Black people are A, getting less time to dream, and B, more of that time has nightmarish content than people of other races.
Well, that's very sobering.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, Michael Nadorf is fabulous. He's been on the show twice. I might have to bring him back about that specific topic. We've mostly talked about nightmares in general, but about the racial differences in nightmares, since it has a huge impact on waking life, and of course waking life on sleeps as well.
Yeah.
So what is next? So I mean, I'm just kind of stopped by that. 2.5 times more nightmares than white people. And you were just starting to say about kind of like why that would be, like kind of the usual things. You were starting to say the usual reasons why.
Sure.
Why don't you say a little more about that?
Sure. And so I think we can imagine them, but I think that the usual reasons are things like Black people, again, on average, in a world where we have, we live in a society that is systemically racist. Black people have not been given equal access to jobs, to education, that might, all things that support the ability to get a job that's secure, that might not interfere with sleep, or to live in a home where you have enough space to be distanced from other people and get good sleep, or for that house to be located in a place where there's noise pollution and sounds that make it difficult for you to sleep. There's also trauma, and that bleeds into night space, right? So you might have the right location, have the quiet, have the ability to control when you go to sleep each night, but that trauma stays with you overnight. And
very much so.
In your dream space, it might show up and wake you up.
Right.
In talking to Michael, who I mentioned earlier, he spoke of how, nightmares are recognized because we wake up as a result of them. And that kind of disruption of sleep has all kinds of impacts. We've all lived that in some way.
Right. Well, it can be kind of a vicious cycle too. I imagine that if we're having trouble sleeping, then we can get more stressed, and then the stress makes it harder for us to sleep.
Right.
Yes.
Of course.
We've all had that experience, and I think, as you say, for all these reasons, Black people have had much more of that. What is your response? What do you do about that?
Sure. So. Yeah. So I went on this sort of investigation in the space that I was lucky to have because of my thesis project at school. And I did a couple of things. I wanted to start to learn about how different people dream. I realized that I talked to friends and family about dreams a bit, but I wanted to just understand a little bit more breadth of experiences. And so I spoke to you. I spoke to a lot of folks who work in some way in the dream world. But I also did an experiment where I sent dream journals out to a group of Black people living in one of the 5 boroughs in New York, and had them record their dreams for 2 weeks, and to also start to code some of the feelings that their dreams left them with. And so it ended up being this really massive endeavor. I think 179 dreams found their way back to me in these journals.
Wow.
And people used 142 times people coded those dreams with words, and they range everything from scared, confused, anxious, happy, loved, upset, abandoned, fantastic, positive, heartbroken. And so I started to just learn about what are some of the similar qualities across dreams? The funny thing is that Kanye West came up quite a lot. He was in the news during that time. And I started to, through the similarities, realize that there was opportunity to push dreams in different directions. And I began to experiment with that. And so I was really taken with this Kanye West insight, because I thought, wow, some of the things that you experience during the day, if directed, might be able to bleed into your dream space if you're really intentional about absorbing certain kinds of information.
Okay.
And then I also was interested in the senses, touch, smell, sight, sound, or hearing. All of these are things that while sleeping could impact the way someone's dreams evolve. And then I guess I spoke to two different people, one being Michael, who shared that there's this nightmare sort of anti-incubation that might be able to be used in a positive way.
An anti-incubation? Do you say any more about that?
I'm calling it an anti-incubation. Okay. You didn't use that word, but essentially what the work is he works a lot with people with nightmares. If someone has a recurring nightmare, I'm making this one up, but let's say, they're dreaming about being in an ocean and a shark attacks them. That you can, like, the kind of best practice way to get rid of that pattern is actually to spend time during your waking life imagining this scenario and imagining a different outcome. So, maybe as the shark is about to attack, you grow wings and you can fly, or, whatever you want as a different outcome. And if you really set your intention in practicing that different outcome, like giving your brain like the visual language for that different outcome, you actually are able to introduce it and have it become the reality of your nightmare, which then isn't a nightmare anymore. But then when you go to sleep, you have the dream that ends with the wings versus the bite.
Okay.
So I was interested in that way of manipulating through intention. That's what I'm calling it. Sort of like deciding to incubate a dream that ends differently from the one that you might already, a pattern you might be stuck in, like the shark example.
Right. Okay.
I also spent some time speaking to the MIT Media Lab, and while I was there, learned about a study where a brain was looked at during time of daydream, and it mirrored a lot of the kind of work and patterns that brains had during night dreaming. And so I started to think, putting that together with Michael Nadorf's research around dream incubation, that there might be an ability to set an intention about the kind of dreams that one might have without having to manipulate the dream once you're already asleep, like lucid dream.
Because not everybody can lucid dream. Speaking as one who's a frustrated lucid dreamer, not everybody can do that. And I know Michael Nadorf also emphasizes that, but not everybody has access to that. And so you're saying that by daydreaming, by practicing this different outcome during a daydream, that you can actually influence your night dreams and help relieve some of your nightmares. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that was at least the intention. And I think that there were definitely signals that could work through some of I ended up doing a few experiments with that group that I mentioned I'd sent the dream journals to initially.
I want to take a break here for a moment, but I want to just let everybody know that this is Victoria Rogers, and that I want to really get into this audio file that you created as part of your Parsons degree called Black Noise, which is an amazing agglomeration of many inspirational statements and soothing and relaxing, and a way to turn inward. I have some clips from that I'd like to play, and how that benefits the people who are who need it the most. So, but I have this little campaign I do online. I call Support the Mothership. This is the Mothership, KSQD, and we're so glad to have your contribution. And I want to say that whenever I listen to pledge drives, I too find them a little bit nagging. I'm like, oh no. But what I've noticed is that when I contribute, after I've contributed, I don't feel like they're nagging anymore. I'm like, oh, I'm one of those. I did that. So I encourage you to dial in or to click in at ksqd.org and make a contribution, and then you'll know you're part of the team.
And you know that you're weaving a web of a resilient community across this region. It's a very powerful act.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Christine.
All right. So give us a call at 831-900-5773, or you can go to ksqd.org.
Excellent. Okay. So this is the Dream Journal, and we are having a wonderful conversation with my guest, Victoria Rogers. And I think I'd maybe like to play a clip from that Black Noise production that you made, Victoria. Does that sound like a good idea to start with that?
Sure. And before we jump into it, I just want to be super clear that I have no musical talent at all. And I really was looking across all of the different ways in which dream space could be influenced, and chose sound for a few reasons, which we can get into. But I had a great collaborator her name is Alani Uwane, who's getting a master's degree at Harvard, and really kindly jumped in and was a support in remixing found sounds, because at least for the capacity of the project for now, we weren't able to create sounds anew. And so she was able to take some of the parameters of the project, find what existed in the world already, and borrow from it to create this soundscape.
Right. And it is really a soundscape, and weaving together of a huge variety of different kinds of sounds. And it's 80 minutes. And so I have just made a couple selections. One is near the beginning where you're kind of setting the stage. And then I have another one a little later on, but there's just a huge variety, and I will include a link to the soundscape. It's called Black Noise on the episode page. It's a Vimeo video that you can listen to anytime you like. Okay, Rick.
Awesome, thank you. And Gina Golden, the last shout out, but was the hypnotherapist whose voice is at the beginning.
Oh, it is. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
We will live in the future that we dream of today. This is your guided arrival to Daydream, a Black Noise project. Welcome. Here you will find the space to imagine. This sense of exploration will guide you towards experiencing deep freedom within your dream space. The freedom to imagine. We will live in the future that we dream of today. Let your mind wander. You are free now.
Okay, that is amazing. It's just like it's just like a way of really settling in. And so, I take it that there's like an intention of using this as kind of a daydream, as a way to relax and tune inward.
Exactly, and I think another piece of it, which, you know, as the project continues to evolve, because I'm still working on it, I think one of the goals that I had was to build on the space that dreams give you to practice or experience things that might be harder to explore or experience in daily life.
Well, say some more about that. What do you mean? Dreams give you a chance to practice?
They do. It's like I was reading, and there's a Brazilian neuroscientist whose book I was reading while working on this project, and you know, the most typical example I think is with golfers and their golf swing, where he had done some research around this idea, which is talked about in the golf world, of, oh, you know, I went to sleep and I practiced my swing and I came back the next day better at it.
So do you have to be a lucid dreamer to do that? I mean, do you have to like wake up in your dream?
It really is about setting intention, about going, and there's other great experiments that happened a lot actually out of Stanford, around problem solving overnight. So going to bed with the intention of trying to solve a riddle or a challenge, and then waking up with the answer, or waking up with something that points to the answer. Some examples, people, the answer, let's say, is 34, and they're like, oh, I couldn't figure it out, but I kept going to this apartment building and getting off the elevator on the 34th floor. And the person who created the riddle or the problem were like, no, like, you did figure out the answer.
You just didn't know it.
You just didn't know it. And so I guess I'm curious about like that space of potential development, problem solving, practice, access that exists in dream space, or can. And like kind of on the other side, specifically in Black communities, which I think we can take for granted are more policed and afforded less freedoms than other communities. I was also investigating, could dream space be a place where freedoms not typically afforded in daily life are given space for exploration. And so I think some of it's starting to get at it in the clip we just heard, but encouraging people to find their version of freedom, to focus on that, to think about what the future is that they want to have.
Finding your own version of freedom. I love that. That conversation was originally recorded October of 2022. There is much more to come from that conversation. Victoria Rogers reads from the journals of her research participants about the impact that paying attention to their night dreams and their daydreams had on them. We'll also take 2 questions from listeners asking about how Victoria's personal life has been affected by her research. Wanted to jump in here and share with you an audio update that Victoria sent me about what she has been doing lately.
I'm so glad that our conversation is going to be replayed this week, Catherine. Thank you for keeping my work as a dream researcher alive. In terms of updates, most of my updates are outside of the space of dreams. I am still very invested in the concepts behind the project, but there have been a lot of personal growth opportunities that I've had in my professional life and my nonprofit work. And so my focus has been there over the past 6 months or so. I started a job at Autodesk, which is an organization, a software that enables people to design and make anything. So there are a lot of dreamers who are using Autodesk software every day. And I've also had the opportunity to join a few boards, most notably the Studio Museum in Harlem, which is a museum that's focused on sharing stories by artists of the African diaspora. And so through that, I've had a chance to continue to stay close to creative work that enables Black people, another theme from our conversation in October. In terms of the Dream Project itself, I would love to be able to work with a sound designer to fully realize some of the dream soundscapes that were articulated through my project. And I've spoken to several. There's a lot of interest, but I need to do the work on the side of fundraising to ensure that people are compensated fairly if they're a part of the project. I will keep you posted. I hope that I will have more to report soon, and happy listening.
Now back to the show. I want to come back to this idea of finding your own version of freedom. Can you say some more about that?
Yeah. I mean, let me see if I will read some of the notebooks that people sent back to me, include within them experiences. And they also, in my interviews with these groups, talked about sort of the value of this kind of dream space. And I'll read just a couple, and then maybe I can also try to answer your questions.
Sure.
But I almost think in the words of
Thank
of
you.
others as maybe more impactful. I should also say that I wanted every dreamer to be anonymous, and so they have numbers
I'm glad.
to
Yeah,
differentiate them.
That's important.
Yeah, but so Dreamer 13 shared, dreams keep us occupied at night to show us something that we might not see during the day or to tell us something that we could foresee in the future. I don't really know, but I guess dreams are like a reflection type thing. There's been a lot of times where I reflected. I went to, like on past experiences or whatever, right before I went to sleep or in my dreams. And after I woke up from a nap, I felt rejuvenated and like I could think more clearly.
Yes, I've had that experience. Yeah. Okay.
And then another person wrote, I think our dreams are shared. I think our dreams are there to help us in our daily life because if something is going on in your life that's unexpected, you don't really know what to do. It's a good way to get the feel of getting to know a situation before it gets out of control or something happens. And so dreams in that person's instance is a kind of exploration of something in dream space where it is lower stakes than actually exploring it in waking life.
Yeah,
And
right.
then,
That's true. The consequences are all internal.
Yeah, exactly. And there's not the same, everything from judgment to the more, to darker than judgment, the kind of ways in which policing, for example, impacts people of color day to day.
Absolutely. Well, let's say, do you have one more maybe? And then I have a call. We have a caller on the line. I just want to acknowledge the caller. We'll get right to you. But if you have one more for us.
Caller. Sure. Yeah. I have one more. It's about daydreaming.
Oh, yeah.
This person says, I feel like I daydream in the shower specifically. That's my space. When I was younger, I would daydream all the time. It would get me into trouble at school because I wouldn't focus. I feel like now I'm so preoccupied all the time. Sometimes it's difficult for me to take a moment to daydream. It's an act of rest. I also feel like reality is so intense and a lot that a break, like to daydream, really matters. I think that's how you get closer to your ideals, by imagining them. I think it's really important. It helps you shape your ideals. I think people daydream about things to bring them into their reality. It's an important practice.
Yes. I agree with that for sure. Thank you, Victoria. So let's turn to the caller. Yeah, no, these are wonderful quotes. I'm glad you bring in specific quotes from people in your study who are not necessarily as deeply into dreaming as some of us, but it's just that this is the impact of dreams on regular people. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say hello to the caller. Hello, caller. What's your name and where are you calling from? Hi.
Hi, my name is Amir. I'm calling from New York. Just wanted to call in with a quick question. Victoria, it's been wonderful learning about your research. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm just curious, how did your own dreams change over the course of this process?
That's a good question.
Yeah, interesting.
I think that for me, drawing attention to my dreams, being somebody who had thought about them in a light way but wasn't recording them. Once I started this project, I got a dream journal and I actually had things to fill it with. And so I think the more I wrote, the more I could remember my dreams. Just having the intention of spending some time in the morning really helped. And so I think they became more vivid. I remembered them more, and they started to be more and more about dreams. I would have dreams that were like meta dreams because I was so deep in this content. And so I think I mentioned earlier, when I mentioned earlier that the things you see and do throughout the day end up bleeding into your dream space, that ended up being really true for me too.
Javier, how about you? Do you remember your dreams pretty frequently?
I don't, and I think it's a really good idea. It's a good practice to try and journal a little bit more. It sounds very productive and useful.
Yeah, I think what Victoria's saying here of getting a journal and really just planning to have a few minutes of time in the morning to kind of give some space for your dreams is a really good way to kind of open that door, because we all dream. every night, and and not all of us remember our dreams, but we can certainly remember them more often if we give them more attention.
Yeah. It's really heartbreaking to think of dreams forgotten.
Oh, yes. And yet there's also something natural about that. Like, even those of us who remember like 4 or 5 dreams a week, that's pretty high for dream recall. And yet we're probably each having 4 or 5 dreams a night. And so the vast majority of our dreams just aren't remembered. And even people who say who never remember their dreams, they're still dreaming 4 or 5 times a night. So it's kind of like, I think of it as eavesdropping. When I'm listening in on a dream, it's like, oh, that's what's going on in the subconscious. That's what's going on behind the scenes. And I get to, I get the power of that and the benefit of that. And yet it is like breathing. Like, you can spend your whole life paying no attention at all to your breathing, or you can go down a path of meditation or pranayama and pay a lot of attention to your dreaming your breathing and dreaming. And so it's interesting, these natural processes, and yet there's something so meaningful about the dreams that we do remember that just seem to beg out for appreciation and for sharing.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you both so much.
Thanks for calling, Harvey. I appreciate it. And thanks for being a Dream Journal listener.
Of course. Bye-bye.
Right. So, Victoria, I wondered, do you want to take another minute and listen to another clip from the Black Noise? I have a kind of a different kind of a clip. Okay, and Rick's queuing that up. Here we go.
Ever done anything like that.
Oh, that was shorter than I intended. But there's quite a bit of drumming on this. There's like there's a certain amount of this very beautiful kind of African drumming, and then there's quotes from Martin Luther King, but there's a lot of space for introspection. There's some words in there. There's also this wonderful quote from Andrewsa Lawson about the tribal nature of who we are, I think is the word that I was trying to capture in that clip. I apparently didn't quite get that. But there's just this huge variety of space to let your mind wander and receive some inspiration. And I wonder if you have what else you'd like to say about Black Noise, Victoria?
Sure. I can share a little bit of like the requirements that I gave to Alani, who's the collaborator mentioned earlier. I had done a lot of research from lived experiences of those dreamers who I was sort of getting a lot of content from through their dream journals, and then these expert interviews I did, and also analytical research. And I really wanted to come up with a set of requirements for Black Noise that would ensure that it was directed towards and built for busy people living in urban settings, giving them some of that space that you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And I also wanted it to be free and something that could be shared digitally. And the length of Black Noise correlates. There's one for daydreaming, one for dreaming at night. Oh. And they correlate with the average sleep cycle. So one of them is 90 minutes, which is the average sleep cycle. And the other is a little bit less than 90 minutes, which mirrors how much time people take on public transport, because in my interviews I learned that was one of the big moments for daydreaming.
Yes.
Was on a morning commute.
I remember when I first came to Santa Cruz and I was taking the bus from Brookdale down through Santa Cruz up to the university every day. It's a long ride. It's like an hour each way. And I decided to not use it as a space to study and not use it as a place to read the news or anything. And it was a really good daydreaming space.
Wow. Yeah, I wish I had a commute like that. It's funny because I live pretty close to Parsons, which was mostly a good thing, but not good for my commute daydream time. But I have this sort of moonshot vision of the project being something where I was in collaboration with some of the public service providers, like the subway here in New York, or the CTA in Chicago, where I'm from, where it could play, and there could be an invitation to daydream for those riders who happen to be commuting at that moment. I think would be a really incredible outcome for a project like this one.
Okay. Well, that ties right in with the question we got on the phone that somebody just handed me. That says Owen called, and he would like to know how Victoria's project will continue to develop.
Oh, so I'm still exploring it, but I think right now I think that there will be a way to engage with it digitally beyond the Vimeo links I have currently. And the reason for that being that I want to recreate the sounds with original sounds, and I want to create a few different options based on what kind of dream exploration someone is interested in.
Oh, okay.
And I also want to provide space for people to share their dreams. So the idea being, if you went through this sound journey overnight or during a daydream, what were some of the experiences you had? And start to map how and if the experiences that people have become more or less similar based on if they're listening to the same kind of inputs and sounds. And so I'm hoping that I'll be able to develop that website over the next several months. And I also have this idea that I just mentioned around this moonshot of having it play in some public spaces as an avenue to get people to daydream.
Right. Oh, I love that. I love the phrase that I just heard. They're black sound journeys. They're not just soundscapes. That there really are journeys, and these audio files that you're sharing here really are journeys. And they kind of start with a settling in, and then there's many stops along the way. And
yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah.
I have Alani to thank for making it all possible. You should see the things I handed her. Like, in this 4 minutes, I want it to be like this, and then and she was able to kind of take everything that had been written and verbalized and turn it into what I think is a really beautiful journey.
Wow, that's wonderful. So Victoria, what is what is it that we haven't gotten to yet? That's the question I always like to ask my guests. Is like, what is it we haven't gotten to that you would like to share?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I'm curious about, and it's sort of an open exploration, is around the power of suggestion.
Yeah, the power of suggestion. Mm-hmm.
How at different points throughout our days, and especially in this moment of more sort of like vulnerability that happens around sleep and therefore around dreaming, there are different levels of suggestibility. And I think one of the studies that I was really intrigued by was this woman named Maren Cordy did a study where she told people to sleep deeper in advance of sleep. And then she had a set of metrics she was measuring, like depth of sleep through, and it worked. People slept more deeply just because there was the suggestion to. And I just think that opens up really interesting doors. And another part of it was that she learned that only happened if someone told you to sleep deeper. You couldn't say it to yourself.
Really? Huh. That's surprising. What?
I know.
Interesting.
And yeah, it's really interesting. But I think that there's this kind of she's a researcher. And so in doing this, I think there was like an authority component,
right,
in a way, that maybe with yourself doesn't exist.
Yeah, interesting. We are social beings, we humans, aren't we? We have very relational.
Right.
Yeah. There's something.
So I think being really.
Please, yeah.
Oh no, I was just going to say, I think being really conscious of like what those cues are that you're giving yourself through other people, like mediated through social media or television or radio, or that your brain, even unconsciously, is onboarding those things. And I think that's what's so interesting about her study. And so I think having real intentionality about what those signals and cues are.
Right. So the accidental suggestion. Well, even you were talking about community spaces and like in inner city environments where it's just never quiet, and sirens and neighbors and
right.
And that those especially in places where there's your more chaotic environment, that is suggestible. That's going to get into your brain, into your dreams.
Right. Exactly.
Well, this is really amazing work that you're doing, Victoria, and congratulations on finishing your degrees. That's awesome.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your support and help along the way.
Absolutely.
It's been very valuable.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Well, I hope we stay in touch, and I want to ask you, how can people get in touch with you? What would be the best way for people to contact you if they have more questions?
Oh, sure. I guess Instagram is the best way. I'm Victoria, M as in Marie, Rogers, Rogers.
Amazon, like M-A is like Amazon. M as Marie.
Oh, sorry. M as in Marie. So it's just Victoria and then M for my middle name, and Rogers, Rogers.
Victoria M. Rogers. Okay, I will put that on the episode page, and people can contact you there. Victoria M. Rogers. So thank you. Do you have any last things you'd like to share with our listeners as a kind of a closing?
No, I think that my encouragement is just to take your dream life as seriously as your waking life and begin to explore it.
That's a good one. All right. Take care, Victoria. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
All right. Goodbye now.
Okay. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed that episode. I'll be back next week with Dr. Michael Malura, who specializes in Jungian-based dream work using classical methods and also dream-based music composition. He teaches dream work to clinicians at the Wright Institute of Los Angeles and gives dream music concerts. So you can tune in and listen to the live broadcast of the Dream Journal again next Saturday at 10, or catch the podcast replay, which will be released as always on the Monday following the show. I'm Catherine Bell, and this has been the Dream Journal. Thanks for listening. You can find out about my own dream coaching practice at experientialdreamwork.com. Email me at catherine@ksqd.org. That's KATHERINE@ksqd.org. Please contact me so we can talk about dreams, and then I can let you know about my upcoming dream offerings. I'd like to thank Rick Cleffel of our engineering and music creation. You can find the ambient music at pandemia.com. I'd like to thank Eva Milady for audio editing, Christine Barrington for pitching support. The intro music is Water Over Stones. Outro music is Everything, both by Mood Science. Join me again next Saturday at 10 a.m. And tomorrow morning when you wake up, write down your dream and bring it to the next Dream Journal. I am Catherine Bell, and you're listening to KSQD Santa Cruz.
you.